Welcome to Ask an Advisor. I'm Krista DeBiaz. I'm here with Fiduciary financial advisor, Mr. Wes Moss of Team Clark.
I like that, Mr. Wes Moss. I like that.
Clark hates being called Mr. Howard.
I like Mr.
Yeah,
Mr.
see? You guys
I like the full name.
You guys are very different. You're complementary to each other, which a lot of people say to us in the comments. Very different content. But what you have in common, you're both very nice giving guys. And today, Wes, you're going to talk about, are you richer than you think? I hope so.
I bet you our audience is.
Our rich ratio, yeah. And then after that, you're going to talk about the NUA rule. I have to admit ignorance.
I'll let you just take that one. You can talk.
I have no idea what that is. I've never heard of it. Again, I'm going to learn. I know I'm going to learn at least one thing on this podcast, but bet you it'll be a lot more than one thing.
It's pretty rare, but if you have a 401k and you work for a company that's publicly traded, it might very well apply to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What do we think? Let's start with this, I'd say, more fun topic, which is I guess I would title this, are you richer than you think, and what your rich ratio is. I think that we often in America, and I'm just thinking about some of the questions we've gotten over the last half a year, people will say, well, I don't have a whole lot, but I have this. And I think, wow, that's still a lot of money, particularly when you're looking at the Federal Reserve has a website that I guess they do it once a year, but they track, and you can go back in time and look at it where we are relatively recently of just median savings, median net worth, and average and median by age category. And those numbers they take into account a lot of people don't have any savings in America, and they're just living paycheck to paycheck. And they're not even thinking 401k, 403b, 457. So we also have to remember, and I think that the folks listening to this, we've never done a study on the net worth of the Americans who listen to financial podcasts, but I bet you it's pretty high because you're thinking about it. And you are, and if you're a younger person, if you're in your 20s listening to us today, I'd put good money on the fact that by the time you're 60, you're gonna have a lot of money. Because it's really about the longevity. It's the length of this journey we're on.
Get rich slow.
And the folks that ask questions in their 60s and they say, oh, I've only got 2 million, 3 million, 5 million. It's because they've been doing this for 30, 40 years. Meaning the sport of saving, if you will, and investing.
Oh, sport. I like it.
Maybe it's like it's a mild combat sport. It takes a lot over time, and it never gets super easy. Now, when you're rich, supposedly, maybe it does get a little bit easier. I saw a comedian the other day that somebody yelled from the audience, how much money are you? How rich are you? And he said, well, I have hundreds of money. was his answer. But he said, I think that it's that if I had more money, I would change my lifestyle and do something different. If I'm rich, that's not the case. And I'm a big believer of this. Money does bring happiness, but only up to a point, and then we get diminishing marginal returns. And there's all sorts of studies around this. The Woodrow, I think UCLA did one of the early studies that got a lot of traction. University of Pennsylvania has done lots of studies around wealth and money and happiness. And I've done many. And I think to me, it's abundantly clear that we don't have a lot of money heading into retirement. Our happiness levels are pretty low because we're nervous and we're scared about money. And we get to a point where we have some money. I see that happiness levels are kind of in more of a neutral zone. But once we get to $1 million, and it's still a lot, I get that. I've gotten pushback on both sides. I've heard, Wes, back in my first book, the median happy retiree checkpoint was getting to $500,000. People would say, that's so much. That was 15 years ago. That's so much. I can't believe you have to get to that point. And then people have said, that's not nearly enough. So they're all personal. These numbers are personal to you and your spending. But I still see that ratio is that we want to get to at least $1 million in retirement assets saved, and the happiness levels rise at that point, and they rise a little bit more at an even higher category, but not tremendously. So I think of it as a plateau effect. We've got to get a certain amount, then more money doesn't really add to much more happiness. The question is, when do you feel rich? Joe Rogan said he didn't feel, and this guy makes, I don't know, it's $120 million a year, or his net worth is 100 plus million. I don't know what it is. Plenty of money. But he said the first time he felt rich is when he went out to a nice dinner and had zero guilt about what he spent on dinner. That's one way to look at it. It's all relative. I think of it as what I've written about over the years is your rich ratio, which is essentially your rich ratio is what you have coming in every month is your income. A lot goes into that, divided by what your need is. So if your rich ratio is over 1, you're rich. I mean, in most people's book, meaning that if you need $5,000 a month to do all the things you want to do and your investments and your Social Security, maybe a pension are bringing in 6 comfortably, then you're over 1 and you're rich. You can do whatever you want to do. What's another $2,000 a month or $3,000? Is it going to change your life? It might not. So you're by any stretch of the way I look at it is that's a great rich ratio. Now, if you're bringing in $20,000 a month, you're half, pretty awesome. But if you need 25 to pay all your bills, then you're under 1 and you're not really that rich. You might have tons of money coming in, but you're running a deficit, and that's an uncomfortable place to be too. So it's not about the amounts coming in and going out. It's about that ratio. And I think that, to me, is what makes the most sense. The other way to look at it is that, and I pulled some statistics around median income. The median income, household income in the United States is about $75,000. Household income. So this is 2 people working. Now, not every family, both people work, but there's 2 people working. That's the median income. In California, it's $111,000 per year. In Georgia, it's around $92,000. So those are just some of the median amounts in the United States. The other thing, you can think of it as some benchmark it this way. If you have 6 times your salary saved at age 50, you're way ahead of the game in America. Meaning that if you're making $100,000 a year and you're 50 and you have 6 times that or 600 saved, you are way ahead of the game. So a couple other signs that you're a little richer than you might think or giving yourself credit for. Not living paycheck to paycheck. You're able to save. We talk about, you've got to put 15% in your 401k, minimum get your free match. We say that is that it's almost like a have to, but if you can do that, you're in pretty good shape.
Yes.
You're in really good shape. So and I think the other one is, so if you're able to invest, you're in a really good spot in America. A lot of people are not even able to do that. And then if you've got any sort of financial buffer, if you've got dry powder and you can look at your investments and say, I've got a year's worth of spending, even though we want 3 years, you're starting to build up a war chest of money that'll keep you relaxed and reduce the anxiety around not having enough. I mean, still, no matter what asset category you're looking at, some people are still worried about running out. So I think that our listeners are probably better off than they might think, richer than you might think. But just ask yourself, when's a period of time where you feel like you have enough money? And I like Joe Rogan's answer. When I paid for dinner and I didn't feel any guilt about how much I spent. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Okay, question time. This one came in from Kevin in Ohio. Hi, Wes. I often hear about the 3-bucket strategy, but I'm wondering if my wife and I need to worry about having a brokerage account. I'll turn 50 in 2 months, and my wife is 43. I have a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, and I also have a traditional 457B and a Roth 457B. I work for a state university and will have a pension when I retire. I will not have Social Security because I've paid into a state pension my whole career and don't have enough credits. My wife has a Roth IRA and will have Social Security. I plan to retire at 65, and my wife will probably retire at 67. I understand a brokerage account is a bridge account for those wanting to retire early, so I wonder if my wife and I really need one since we're not retiring early.
Well, how do you, Kevin? So there's a lot to this, and I was like scribbling this down quickly because he said Roth, he said IRA, he said Roth, said 457, he said 457 Roth. Roth 457.
He's got a lot of accounts.
A lot of different accounts. And you're young. Kevin is how old?
He's turning 50.
He's turning 50.
I love it. And they have their plan. They know when they're going to retire. I admire people who are so really have the forethought and planning under their belts. I don't necessarily have that.
And his wife is 43.
Right.
So that's a long way off from retirement. But you're completely right. We want the three bucket approach. For most people, it's just giving us flexibility to be able to control our tax bracket when we get to retirement. 1, 2, it gives us optionality of when we can pull money out. And 3, even though you may have a plan to now, if he's a professor.
He works for a state university.
So probably a lot of job security too. It's not, so probably if you say you're going to work till 65, sounds like you probably will. But that's still a long way off. It's 15 years and the world changes and not everything's guaranteed and states can run into financial trouble and universities just like anybody or any situation. Nothing is guaranteed. So I like the idea of having these different accounts to give you optionality. So it's hard to argue not to have some brokerage money, but this is what's so fascinating about Kevin, your situation is that you may have what's already better than that. Because Kevin, you've got the 457, and the 457 allows you to tap that whenever, really, if you stopped working early, you could be able to get to that without a 10% penalty. Even better, you've got the 457 Roth, which is great, which is being able to tap that money without penalty. Now, there is a nuance to the Roth 457. It's not that I believe that the way that there's a ratio of contribution and earning. So you may owe some taxes on that if you are under 59 and a half. But it doesn't mean you can't access it before 59 and a half. So there's two separate rules going on there. It's a little complicated.
You usually want to wait on the Roth, right, and do the traditional first anyway.
Well, this is a Roth 457,
right,
which has got even more flexibility,
right.
I think. So the answer here is that of all the people that I've talked to around questions like this, you may be in the category where you really don't need the brokerage because you have the 457 and the 457 Roth. And I think he also said he has another Roth. So you've got all these Roth. And those are ultra flexible, particularly because of 457 Roth. So do you need a brokerage? Probably not. Is it a bad idea to have one? Probably not. I think it's not a bad idea. So sure, go. And it sounds like you have pretty steady income. And your wife's several years, she's
43.
several years younger. And she still has a long way to go. I don't think you're going to kick yourself for having some after-tax money. And if you're one of these folks that, because you have all these other accounts, have never done that, I don't think you'll kick yourself for having a brokerage account. Yes. So sure, I would start contributing to one as well, but you're in a very good position.
Yeah, and his wife's planning on working 24 more years. So, okay.
That's a long way to plan.
Glenn in Texas sent this one. And hey, Wes, I'm really enjoying your financial advice and tips on the podcast. Recently, a caller asked about target date retirement funds versus putting together a diversified portfolio yourself. I know you think of target date funds are too conservative as far as their percentage of stocks versus bonds, but I think there's an easy compromise for those of us that still want a very simple target solution. Could I just compare the asset allocations in target date funds that are 5 or 10 years after my actual retirement date? So I'm planning on to retire plan on retiring in 2030, I would instead possibly pick the 2035 or 2040 plan to get a higher percentage of stocks.
Glenn is the perfect Clark Howard listener because he just hacked the target date system. It's that is such a great idea, Glenn, is that, yeah, look, the 2030 fund maybe is too conservative for you. Just do the 2035. Or the 2040. It's a target date hack, Glenn. You're right, and we've never brought that up. Now, you also are. We don't want to play fast and loose with our retirement, with our retirement arsenal either. So really, what that means. So I don't want it to be this square peg round hole. I really don't want to deal with this. So I'm just going to pick a further out date. Really good idea, and you absolutely can do it. But here's what you're doing, though, when you're doing that. You're looking under the hood, and that's what matters. Is you're opening it up and saying, wait a minute, what's this? This year gives me this allocation, and that's what matters. So I think this is great as long as you're revisiting this every year. And you say to yourself, and you have conversations maybe with a financial advisor, maybe you're reading about this and you're saying, I really want to be 70% in equities, and I want to have a certain amount of that in U.S. and international, and the rest in safety. If you know where you want to be, then you just open the hood of a couple different target date years, and you're going to find it. And now, remember, they change every year, so you've got to just stay on top of it. But for you to look at that once or twice a year just to make sure the allocation under the hood in real life is what matches it up with what you feel comfortable with, then that's the golden ticket on making these things work. But very cool idea.
Aaron in Ohio says, "Hello, Wes. I like being able to set up recurring contributions to my brokerage account. So I'm using index mutual funds over ETFs. I also like using Vanguard mutual funds because they're taxed like ETFs. If I want to buy these Vanguard funds in a Schwab or Fidelity account where my donor advised fund will be, do I have to pay Schwab or Fidelity extra? Also, if you have time, I'm hoping you can explain the recently expired patent that Vanguard has on their mutual funds that helps avoid taxes in a brokerage account. Will Schwab or Fidelity be able to do this with their mutual funds too? Thanks for all the great info you provide."
Aaron, Vanguard really did have a special sauce because they had their traditional mutual funds, index mutual funds, and then they also had for the same indices, they have ETFs. So they kind of have the same thing, but in two slightly different vehicles. And that allowed them to be even more tax efficient, let's say. But their exclusivity on that, to your point, expired a couple years ago. It was 2023. So there's no reason that the other mutual fund companies don't do the same thing. Most mutual fund companies that I know of at this point, almost all the big ones that were all mutual fund have added ETFs. So now they have mutual funds and ETFs. So I don't know why they wouldn't be able to do it. I think the real delineation here is regulatory. So it's a matter of when they can get approved. These are, think, $1 trillion asset management firms. And they're going to have to get regulatory approval to be able to start doing that within their funds and ETFs. So I don't know why they wouldn't. I think it's just a matter of time. So that's the short answer on that, Aaron. Secondly, I don't want to answer this for everyone because I don't know what different retail investors' fees are depending on your asset levels, depending on who you're working with, whether it's Fidelity, Schwab, or some other platform. So there's a lot of variables here, but usually on one platform, a Vanguard mutual fund or a lot of different mutual funds will have a transaction fee still. So that's why the lower friction option is usually the ETF. And so if you want to have a place where your donor advised fund is one place and you want a certain fund family that may have a transaction fee on the mutual fund side, that's why it's usually better to switch over to the ETF side because those are transactions. There shouldn't be any transaction fees for ETFs, even though some mutual funds still do.
Okay. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, you're going to teach us what the NUA rule is.
NUA, that's right. The rule of if you have a 401k and company stock, it may apply to you.
Okay, and we'll get to some more questions.
Welcome back to Ask an Advisor here on the Clark Howard Show. Wes Moss here with Krista DiBiase. What are we doing next?
You're going to teach me something new.
You're the host.
Hopefully I'm not the only one who doesn't know what this rule is, but I am. I always like to say I'm ignorant, but I'm not stupid. But I definitely am ignorant on this topic.
It's okay. So this one, you would think this would apply to a lot of people, but I haven't seen it in practice that many times. Maybe like a half a dozen times in 25 some years. So it definitely happens, but this is NUA stands for the rule of net unrealized appreciation.
Okay.
Net unrealized appreciation. So think of, let's say you have a 401k plan and 401k and you've got it all in company stock. And maybe this is partially why is that you have to have a lot of company stock in order for this to work.
Which I think you and Clark would not recommend that you have all of your 401k money in one company stock.
Correct, but if you're in every city in America has a legacy company, right? So Coca-Cola has been here
In Atlanta,
forever. So
Georgia.
if you were working for Coca-Cola in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and these are companies that usually have a lot of longevity.
My dad worked for PepsiCo forever, yes, in New
Apply to
York,
this.
yeah.
Think about, we're here at Will, so we have a lot of Lockheed Martin folks here, Delta folks, but every big city, not every big city, but most big cities have 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 publicly traded companies. Tons of people work there, and they may very well be getting stock. So it only applies to company stock. If you have $500,000 in mutual funds in a 401k, this rule doesn't even come up. It only applies to your company stock. So imagine, and here's how it works. Remember, it's about net unrealized appreciation. Well, nothing inside a 401k is realized anyway. It's all protected it's all in the crock pot. 401k is in the crock pot. IRA, it's in the crock pot, stays. But imagine if your company stock is worth $500K today, but the basis, so what you paid for it, because it's appreciated over the years, is $100. This might be an opportunity for utilizing the NUA rule. So if you were to roll the 500 over, when you pull money out, let's just say over time you're at the 25% tax bracket, $500K times 25 is $125K in taxes. Okay? Now, there's a big difference between can be a big difference between your income tax rate and your long-term capital gains tax rate. That arbitrage is where this starts to come in. So what this rule allows you to do, if you've got highly appreciated stock, by the way, it doesn't work if you don't have a lot of appreciation in the stock, but if you know your basis and it's pretty low, what this allows you to do is roll the basis, that 100K, roll that out, roll all the stock out into a non-IRA. You put it in a brokerage account. Wait a minute. But the rule of NUA is that you're paying ordinary income on the basis of the stock. So you're paying 25% on the 100K.
Okay.
Now it's 25K. Well, how do you get your money out? Well, you still get to sell the stock, but you get to sell the stock at long-term capital gain rates, which are only 15%. So let's do the math on that. On 400K left, right? We've got 400K times 15, and that would be 60. So we paid $60,000 and we paid $25,000, right? So now we're at 85K versus if we just did a regular rollover, 125K.
Wow.
What?
I realize just listening to you over these many months, how much just taxes are so important in your retirement planning.
Tremendous. And as a certified financial planner, I'm not a CPA, I'm not a tax advisor, so I do say these disclaimers, which are I'm not providing tax advice. Well, tax advice is it's about filing your actual taxes. There's a lot of discussion around how do you efficiently manage your overall taxes when it comes to all of your retirement accounts. And that is a giant part of the financial world as an advisor. I would say we think of it as investing centric, and it certainly is. But particularly as you work with families who are getting older in retirement, more assets, and things get more complicated, tax discussions are a huge part of it. So anyway, essentially says you got to pay ordinary income taxes on the basis. Then over time, as you sell your stock, and let's say you do it over the course of a couple of years, you sell that other $400,000, and you still stay in the 15% long-term capital gain bracket, because that can go higher, but there's a lot of room to stay in that 15 bracket. Then you can have a pretty nice tax arbitrage between ordinary income rates, long-term capital gain rates, and save yourself a ton in taxes. So it's kind of like this is kind of like one of these financial coupons. It's lost in the junk drawer, and you just all of a sudden, I found, NUA, that applies to me. If you have a highly appreciated stock still in the 401k, think about it.
Okay, we'll go to questions. Michael in Florida says, my wife is a teacher in the state of Florida retirement system and is in the investment plan, which is similar to a 401k. She has the one-time option of going into the pension plan. There's a buy-in to the plan, which wouldn't be a problem for us since we can afford to pay the fee. What things should be considered to decide which plan would be best for us? The idea of a guaranteed check for the rest of our lives sounds good, but I feel like we may be able to invest our money cheaper than the FRS. She also has the ability to purchase a lifetime annuity when she retires, which the FRS says is fee-free. We both have Roth IRAs, and I have a 401k from a former employer, although we have most money in my wife's investment plan. What should be considered before making this decision?
Kevin. And how old are they? They're pretty young, right?
He didn't say how old they are.
Yeah. She's probably pretty young because she's having to make the decision of whether to go into the Florida State retirement plan, whether you go into the pension side or the do-it-yourself side. Think of it that's what you're contemplating here, Kevin, for your wife. It's a hard one to figure out. I would look at it, but here's how it could play out. And I think that the biggest variable here in my mind would be how long do you think your wife is going to plan to be a teacher? Because if it's a short-term thing, then the pension's not going to add up to much. And if you only do it for a couple years, it's almost maybe not worth doing that. You might as well just save money in the retirement plan side so that it's portable, roll it to an IRA at some point if that makes sense for you. Or just keep it in the retirement plan. But if you think that she's going to be a teacher for a long time, like let's call it 25, 30 years, then you've got this cool financial situation where you don't have a pension, so you're saving in your retirement accounts. You're the stock, and she's the bond. Because now you can say, well, we've got this nice way of looking at retirement planning. My wife's going to have a pension because I think she's going to stay there for the long haul. She's going to stay and I don't know the exact amount of years you need to in Florida, but let's call it 25 years or so, or probably 20, probably 10. Mm-hmm. But it starts to really get attractive when you hit that 30-year mark, similar to teachers here in the state of Georgia. So I think I would be considering how much time I think I'm going to do this job. If it's temporary, maybe you just do the retirement plan. If it's going to be a long-term commitment over time, that pension could be a really nice supplement and I'd say a much safer and secure way to be approaching retirement, particularly when you've got your savings as well and you can combine the two together. That can make for a really nice combo.
Okay, and then an interesting one from Nathan in Louisiana. I'm 35 and a career locomotive engineer for one of the Class 1 railroads. They offer no 401k for union employees, but have an ESPP that matches 1/3 on top of up to 6% based on base earnings. No bonuses or overtime, and we sure work a lot of overtime on the railroad. I max this ESPP match and sell the shares after they vest to transfer the funds into my Roth IRA, which is almost entirely in ETFs. My wife is 34, and her Roth IRA is in a moderate target date 2050 fund. 1, does it make sense to treat my railroad retirement pension almost like a bond fund that would give me permission to dump the more conservative or defensive holdings in our IRAs and go entirely into growth-oriented ETFs? And 2, in the 6 years I've been listening to Clark, I've heard him say to delay taking Social Security until age 70 to maximize the income, and that breaks even withdrawing as soon as possible around age 82. Does it make sense to retire from the railroad as soon as possible, 60 for me, as I'll have my required 30 years of service by age 57? Or should I follow the same advice here and delay retirement? Note, our latest CBAs have started to include language, I believe he means, that has the company paying for us to continue being covered by our national union insurance for the gap years until we're Medicare eligible.
From 60 to 65, yeah.
Right, so insurance isn't a concern for us.
Nate, can you imagine, think about this. Imagine how hard it is working on the railroad.
Oh my gosh.
It's a serious job. Mm-hmm. It's a serious job. And you work a lot of overtime. It sounds like you don't get paid extra for that.
Well, I think it's just he gets overtime, but the earnings, like the base earnings for the ESPP plan don't include
The
overtime.
overtime, got it. Nate, the short answer is yes. You're in a unique situation where the railroad has its own pension plan, and there's a tier 1 and a tier 2 as an employee. And if you're a tier 1, the way the railroad Social Security side of pension, it's not Social Security, but it mirrors that. It's very, very similar to the regular Social Security system. You end up with a Social Security, but it's a railroad Social Security, if you will. I don't know if I'm calling that the right thing. Then if you're a tier 2, you get an actual pension on top of that, like you would get a pension from a company. So now I don't know where you lie in that work status, but very simply, yes, I would look at that as you've got a very stable, you're going to get something very much like Social Security once you retire. So it is kind of the conservative part of the option, similar to the teacher question that we just mentioned, or that we just went over. So Nate, what I would think here is it is a conservative. It has a high level of certainty. So I'd treat it as a safe asset. That means you can invest your other money in a potentially more aggressive way. The other thought here is that the Social Security, the railroad Social Security version is a little different on weighting. And when you get to 60, it doesn't help you to delay to go all the way to 70 like Social Security. So they're similar, but not the same programs. So if you do put your 30 years in and you retire at 60, then you would want to take your railroad pension as you would not want to delay it at all. You don't get this bump up and higher annual payments like you would if you delayed Social Security. So I don't know why the rules are a little bit different. Probably because the railroad is a great service to the United States. It was the lifeblood of commerce that took us from the Industrial Revolution to the greatest economy in the world. I mean, it's the railroad. You don't think of it like that as much today because you don't see trains going by as much as maybe we used to. But it is still the lifeblood of commerce, getting goods around the country, and it's a really hard job. So maybe that's partially why you can take this amount earlier than Social Security, age 60, and I think they should be able to do that. So I'm glad they are.
Yes.
So I appreciate your work there, and you've got the safety net type retirement plan going. Makes you able to maybe invest a little bit more aggressively, and I wouldn't be waiting to turn on the switch when you hit age 60.
All right. Thank you for all of your questions today. I have lots more for you, Wes, for upcoming shows, and we always welcome your questions at clark.com/ask.
Send in your questions. They're awesome. They're very cool.
And we will be back next week with a brand new episode. Have a great rest of your day.